Welcome, everybody. I'm Marissa Cepega. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Assembly Software. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the top 10 intake mistakes that are killing your bottom line. Before we start the webinar, just want to let everybody know that we are recording it. You will receive a copy of this webinar. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. They'll be addressed throughout the presentation. We'll also leave some time at the end for questions. I will be launching a poll during the webinar. If you'd like to learn more about Smith.ai, please opt in, or you can email Alessandra with a request, or in our thank you email, there's also a link to sign up for Smith.ai to learn more about it. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maddy Martin and Kristin Belkofer to do our presentation. So thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here today with Kristin. We are going to be talking about the top 10 intake mistakes that are killing your bottom line. We're eager to have your questions. We have a lot of content to go through, but first, I will just briefly introduce myself. So I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the Senior Vice President of Growth at Smith.ai. We're a 24/7 customer engagement platform. Our flagship solution is Virtual Receptionist. We also offer an AI voice assistant and live chat. So I will explain a little bit more about that as we go on through the presentation and at the end. I've been with Smith.ai for over 7 years now, actually almost 8 in April. And I am here in Buffalo, New York with my 2 dogs who are in my office, and it's quite cold today, so they have not as much exercise as they normally do. So if I randomly mute and say, Kristin, take it away, it's because there's barking in the background. So Kristin, I'd love to be able to share with our audience more about you. So go ahead.
Thanks, Maddy. So my name is Kristin Belkofer. I'm Senior Product Manager here at Assembly Software, primarily working with Neos, which is our cloud-based case management solution. I've worked with Assembly for 3 years, and I spend most of my days talking with law firms, just like all of you here, identifying ways that we can make our software a perfect fit for you guys, and making sure that we're enhancing it to meet your needs. So I live in the Phoenix area, so opposite, I've got nice sunny weather. It's like 55 degrees out right now, and it'll get closer to 70 later today. You can be envious of my weather over here, but you won't be envious in the summer, obviously. But thank you, Maddy. We can take it away.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, I'll live vicariously through you for the next few months. So, right. Well, welcome, everyone. We're so pleased that you're able to join us today. Today, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the top 10 intake mistakes that we see lawyers make every single day and how to fix them. We will also be going through the Neos and Smith.ai integration, which is a direct integration between both platforms, and how to get in touch with us if you're interested in learning more. So, just to set the scene, the important focus today is on the top and middle aspects of the funnel. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the sales funnel and intake funnel. We understand that at the top, there are cold, unqualified leads. Then they move into a qualified state. Then we complete intake and we have a better sense of understanding who they are and what they need and if they're a fit for the services at your firm. After that, the consult is scheduled and hopefully there's a retained client if there's a sense of mutual fit. So that leads perfectly into our first do not do, which is inconsistent processes. And this is an intake mistake because there's rarely perfect standardization, especially in small firms, but tools can help you get there. And what we often see is that what is not documented is very hard to delegate. It's very hard to train new staff to complete. And that can be a bottleneck in the growth of your firm. So be organized, understand discreetly the steps involved, document them, train and transparently communicate them, and make sure everyone has access to that documentation, and make sure that you're mapping the flow. So for example, I often give the example of know the channels that are coming through, know where you need to be responsive. If you have social media presence, that's yet another area where you need to be responsive. Make sure that if you have process or channel specific processes, that you have that documented. Who is monitoring the new lead forms that come in from your website? Who is documenting the new leads that are coming through from your phone or email? It's important that everything is well defined and that it works for the channel in which those leads are coming. Kristin, I know that we have an example here from Neos. Can you speak to intake checklists and how that helps standardize processes for attorneys?
Yeah, so once you have an idea of what all the steps are that you need to take for any intake, one way that you can utilize any case management system, specifically Neos here, is you can have that as a checklist. Now, you may not have the same process for different case types. Maybe in a personal injury case, you're going to want to do ABC. And in, mass tort, you're going to want to skip B, go C, and then have DE. So what you can do is once you've identified all of those steps in your process that you need to have, you can create a template that is just automatically going to apply to all of your cases through a checklist, automatic calculating due dates, assigning to the right people, things like that. So that way you're ensuring you're not really missing any steps in your process. And if you want to skip over a step, you're welcome to. You can just, mark it that way, that you're skipping it, or you can ensure that they're all getting done, being able to run reports on what you've done, what needs to be done, what is delayed or overdue, things like that. So.
Awesome. And, one of the easy ways to check if you are, running inconsistent processes in your firm is to poll your staff to ask yourself, if I were to receive a new potential client, how would I, based on what I know or based on what they know, meaning other staff members, how would I run that process, right? So if you don't already have an intake checklist like this set up, or maybe you are underutilizing the tools that Neos has, take a survey, ask them just to simply write down what are the steps that they're following and compare them and see if they are the same. Because if you find any gaps, that's a great place to start. You might have 1 and 2 consistent and 3 is inconsistent. Maybe 3 and 4 are switched and 5 is the retainer agreement. So make sure that everyone is following the same steps. It is obviously important that conflict checks happen extremely early, but the intake form and that consultation, sometimes there can be a back and forth in data sharing and people may get those steps mixed up. And make sure that they understand what their role and responsibilities are if you do have team members who are assisting you. The second intake mistake is delayed response times. So often we underestimate the value of missed calls. I think so often we just have gotten used to spam and sales calls that at some point you just wonder, is it even worth it, me taking that interruption? Absolutely it is. You need a solution that is able to triage those calls for you. That's of course where Smith.ai can come in. We block those spam and sales calls for free. And then the calls that are relevant, we will screen them if they're new clients. If they're existing clients, then we can follow your instructions for how to handle those calls. But make sure that you understand what a client is worth to you, what your conversion rate is, and then knowing if I take, 100 calls in a month, meaning I receive 100 lead calls, how likely is it that I'm going to get 5, 10, 15, 20 new clients, right? Understand what the financial impact is of that missed call, because you can back your conversion rate up to figure that out. And you will understand that maybe it's costing you, $100, $200, maybe more every single time. And that's costing you that $5,000, $10,000 client, maybe more, maybe less. It depends on your firm. We also want to make sure that all those channels that I mentioned earlier, social media, phone, email, web form completions, that those have a system for follow-up. So a missed call is critical, but also a delayed response to a web form is also a critical miss. make sure that you've got those channels set up and that they are alerting you and your team members. So if you need a Slack message, if you need a notification, if there's an email delay, if you need someone to monitor an inbox, then make sure that those processes are well documented so that you have those channels open, which means that people are going to be using them and that you're as responsive to those channels as you are anywhere else. So it's unfair to say to people, you know, I do have an active Facebook page, but I'm not going to respond to those messages more than once a day, even though I'm very responsive on my phone calls, right? It's at their discretion to use whatever channels you have presented to them. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you're responsive, agnostic of that channel, right? Kristin, anything here that you want to share that you've seen with firms that you work with?
Yeah, so I think it's important, speaking to the two different areas where we have that you talked about here. So one is just making sure that everything is funneling in, right? So we integrate with something called Zapier for our intakes. And so through Zapier, you can connect it to almost any solution. So if you have a web form, if you use a different lead generation software, maybe it is Facebook and you have Facebook messages coming in. You can connect it to all of those things so that those things are automatically flowing in to Neos. As soon as you have something flow in to Neos, then that's when you can standardize those processes. But you can also use Zapier in other powerful ways to automate and make sure that those initial responses are going to that. So outside of just having, a person respond, or maybe it's Smith.ai, you can have automation to let someone know that, hey, we got your message, we're taking a look at your issue, and we'll get right back with you in this amount of time frame. So you can leverage those automations in a way that will help. But I think it's also important to kind of gauge anything that is being delayed. For example, if you have an intake that's been sitting for a while and it hasn't had any activity or any contact, those are all good indicators that you need to reach out to that client and make sure you're not missing anything.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. And I will also share a stat that, 2 out of 3 potential clients base their decision to hire on your initial responsiveness to a phone call, email, text, chat, et cetera, right? That initial contact point. So you have incredible competitive advantage if you imagine a lead. Let's say someone needs a new estate or will or trust, right? And they are calling every lawyer that's coming up on their Google search, and you're paying for ads even more so, or you've paid for SEO over the years, and you have paid for, showing up high on that list. And there you are, and you miss the call. Well, imagine your competitors missing those calls, and then they reach you, and maybe you haven't paid as much as they have, but you're fourth on that list. You can get that business even though you're not top on that list because you are answering the call. The most important thing is answering. Everything else that follows, a few initial screening questions, scheduling a consultation, all those things are possible with a solution like Smith.ai, but you most importantly need to answer that call to give the peace of mind that someone has responded and is able to listen and evaluate if that case is a good fit for their firm. So that initial uptake and screening, that is where I would focus my time if I didn't already have 24/7 answering. And also keep in mind that it's not just 9 to 5, it is 24/7. There are plenty of people who have family members, they have children, they have people at work who maybe they work a late shift, maybe they're at home late after the kids go to bed. They need the opportunity to call and speak with someone on their schedule. And that may be because it's a sensitive matter that they can't talk about while being overheard at work or being overheard at home. So keep that in mind. That is a service to your potential clients, and it will help you win that new business. So this is just a statistic on how much lead conversion can improve based on the time elapsed before the first phone attempt. So it's important not only to be responsive to that inbound call, but also to make sure that you have a solution in place for outbound calls. So just because someone is responding to you via, let me take this bone away from my dog. Hold on a second. Okay, done. Sorry if you heard any grinding on the floor. That was my dog. So think about if you have web forms coming in, these outbound calls are very important so that you're not just playing email tag back and forth. The best way to get in touch with them is to call them. They expect that engaging relationship with you if they're going to hire your firm. So think about how you can be proactive. Just because you got a web form doesn't mean they don't necessarily want to talk to you on the phone. They would love to hear from you. So make that outbound call as quickly as possible. If you can't do it, then you can instruct Smith.ai on how to. So Kristin, talk to us about monitoring stagnant leads. This is such a cool feature.
Yeah, so with our intake features, you automatically come with a dashboard that gives you the ability to monitor certain things. And one of those is idle leads. And you can customize these in any way you want. You can add more information if you want to see, maybe potential value of a lead that you have. And this is just an easy way that when you are working in your system, you can see right at the top the idle leads that you have where they've had no activity, maybe no outreach, maybe, and this is typically going to be from your side, right? As long as you're monitoring or tracking everything inside of your intake, it's going to show up here that it was active, it had work done. But if something goes, maybe let's say an entire day, no activity, or maybe you're later on in the stage and maybe 2 days is unacceptable later in the stage, then that's a good indicator that, hey, I need to go ahead and, from a management perspective, maybe get whoever's assigned to that intake, get them rolling on the ball. Or if it's your specific intakes, you know that those are the ones that you need to focus on to make sure that they don't feel, that client doesn't feel ignored or left behind.
Awesome. What a nice feature that is. So proactive for folks who are using Neos already. So the third intake mistake is neglecting the pre-screening process. So we've been talking around this a little bit in responsiveness and processes, but it's really important that we consider how the pre-screening process can assist your efficiency and productivity, because it can be, depending on your firm, a lot of call volume to get through, or they can be very time-consuming calls when you get them, even if there are only a few. So assume that not every lead is going to convert. Not every lead is the right fit. Many people don't even know that law firms have specialties. So while we're very used to talking about practice areas, that's not common parlance for most of the general public. So we like to think about this as a bottleneck with all these different personas coming through, whether it's an inbound caller, whether it's a qualified lead, whether it's a current client, spam, et cetera. And the issue is that we've got a lot of variety within this funnel. So think about how we can improve this pre-screening process. How can we make sure that we are not answering every single inbound call, that we are assuming that every call is worth our time? It's not. So we need a process for getting rid of spam, sales calls, wrong numbers, unwanted callers. And we need to make sure that there is a scoring system in place to ask basic fundamental questions to make sure that they are a good match for the practice area. We also want to make sure that we are asking the right appropriate questions up front that can be delegated. So these should not be deep in-depth questions. And certainly if a conflict check is relevant for your practice area, then that would be something that might halt that process. And make sure that you have different signals and instructions in place based on what type of caller is coming through, so that there's specific pre-screening for your leads, but you're obviously not going to be asking existing clients if they can confirm all their contact information as you would a new lead, right? So it's important that that is caller type specific when you document those processes. So screening and qualifying leads up front. This is a screenshot from Smith.ai in our new voice assistant, our AI call answering tool. So you can get a sense of the must-have qualities of good leads and how you can set up workflows. So for example, we might have a location-based qualification, service-based qualification. These are simple initial questions to ask. Are you in Gwinnett County? Are you, in a county that this law firm practices in? Or is this a personal injury case? Is it slip and fall? Is it DUI, etc.? So you can do both location and service-based qualification. Think about this framework. The way that I'm presenting it here is just because this screenshot is a helpful tool for me to use. You also want to understand upfront, are they calling on behalf of someone else? Is that caller the potential client, or as is very often the case, they're calling on behalf of someone who may be incarcerated, or they may be unable to speak for themselves, maybe a child and a parent, etc. How did they hear about you? This is the number one thing that I hope that you take away from this webinar, honestly. If you don't ask this initially, it's very easy for them to forget when you then have that consultation, when you then ask them later on and you never captured that data. You can get such granularity if you ask this up front. Ask them what they typed into Google. They said online search. Ask, please tell me more. What did you specifically type in to find my firm? My firm runs on, efficient marketing channels. I would love to know more details. Obviously, we know the reason for calling. We know all those other, data points. But where did they hear about you? Who did they hear about you from? Was it, a Google search? Were you in Maps? Was it a Facebook page? Was it a Facebook group, a local neighborhood group? Anything that you can get here is the most valuable information to you beyond that of the client's value, right? That means that you're going to generate more clients like them, or maybe you want to stall that channel because you're getting a lot of unqualified leads, it turns out, from that channel. Both pieces of information are important. Kristin, anything you want to add here?
I think I'll step in on the next one.
Okay, sounds great. So, imprecise lead qualification criteria. So, as we just discussed, it's really important to capture relevant information up front. You want to collect that case type specific information. What type of case is it? Asking clarifying questions is also important to ensure that you're expanding on those details that may be reflective of that reason why they're prompted to make that phone call. So often people, contemplate legal issues and then they finally take that step to contact an attorney. There's a reason, typically an emotion, that is driving that phone call at that moment. Maybe there's a sense of urgency. Capture that sense of urgency. Capture perhaps even whether they have identified an ability to pay. I've seen many intake forms for attorneys where they're asking, have you decided to work with an attorney, or are you still exploring that as a possibility? Meaning they may not have a committed mindset. So this is not just about case specific information that you want to be thinking about at this stage. This is also about their readiness, their state of being. How can you prepare best for a consultation if you take that into consideration? Kristin, we also have a dynamic intake questionnaire here. Can you speak more to this?
Yeah, so going back to kind of, those precise lead qualifications and even in the pre-screening process. So with Intake Pro, one of the features that you have is the ability to really make robust intake questionnaires. And these are the things that your team is going to be filling out when they're on the phone with the client. So talking about wanting to capture that emotion, you can create custom fields, custom questions to be able to capture those details. And you can really make it very specific to the needs of that case, or you can make it as broad as it is at that stage of the process. So you might have a different intake form depending on what stage of the process you're in. Maybe you are at the early stages or maybe you use a third party and you want a little bit more generic information versus later on when you're going to fill out more, more complete details. You can, swap that out and use a different form for each stage. And when you are making these, it's also important to build them so robust that you have required fields, conditional questions. So in the example over to the side, if you click a certain checkbox, then it's going to bring an entire new set of questions relative to that checkbox. So that way you're able to really get standardized with the amount of details that you're getting and get all of the things that are relevant to you. And what I find are the most successful intake firms that are really focused on winning those clients, their intake forms are very robust. We have some clients that will hire consultants just to build these out and map out their entire, all of their case types and everything to really get into the nitty gritty. You don't have to do that. If you get in there, it's really easy to use and to just make things required, or, if they answer this, then ask them that. And that will help guide those staff that are, going through that qualification through and making sure they're answering or asking and getting answers to all the right questions. Going back to kind of that pre-screening, what you talked about, making sure the marketing campaign or source is documented. That's something that's standard on all of our intake forms. So if it's right there at the top, to ask about it early. And if you're able to document that the marketing campaign or the source, maybe they saw a billboard on, whatever major highway is in your area, you can have that all documented there. So that way you're able to report on it and track on it later.
I love that. This is an incredible tool that you have built at Neos, and I love the conditional logic that's very helpful in asking the right pointing questions to the appropriate new potential clients. So the fifth intake mistake is not leveraging technology. So thinking that you have to do everything with humans all by yourself at the expense, considerable expense of hiring staff, contractors, etc. The example that Kristin just gave is a great one. You have to weigh the cost benefits of going and learning everything about a tool and then teaching yourself how to use it. Is it something that you need to learn that you're going to be using over and over again? Or is it something that you would learn and only do once or twice to set up Neos? It makes sense to use a contractor for that simply because you have no further use necessarily of that knowledge on a consistent basis, at least, right? You might need a couple updates over time, but probably not all the time. And similarly to delegating appropriately to a contractor, delegating to technology is also a similar decision process, right? So what you want to start with is things that are in your comfort zone. If you were all of a sudden to say, I've never had a staff person, but all of a sudden I'm going to give them, all these drafts to write, well, you're probably going to be disappointed. So similarly with technology, start small, delegate those simple tasks, build those simple automations, and get started in a way that keeps you in your comfort zone, maybe just on the boundary of it, and show that it is effective, that it is having an impact on your productivity, on your peace of mind, on your coverage, 24/7. If you have phone calls, for example, or intakes coming through Neos, you want to make sure that the data is well organized. So if you're spending time on admin tasks, if you're spending time cleaning up data, it's probably because you're not using those consistent lead intake forms that would guide you to do so every single time. So think about what's within reach and then iterate from there. I think it doesn't have to be you going all into building your own AI chatbot, right? You want to first delegate your phone calls and make sure that those are handled properly following your instructions. And then you can, with that information, start doing more complex tasks. There's a great example here within Neos for intake automation and a follow-up text message that can be triggered. So Kristin, do you want to speak to this briefly?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you can automate with the intake process, and that I would say is probably the most common area of a firm's practice where we see them delegate or utilize automation is specifically in the intake area, whether that be, getting those automations with Zapier and things like that, or it could be within the actual communication with the client inside of Neos. So I showed you that checklist earlier, right? where you can have all of these different items. But you can also build out automations that are tied to those checklist items so that rather than you typing out the text message to your client, when you check off that item, or maybe when that item is first opened up, it's that turn for that checklist item. It's going to go ahead and send a text message to the client at whatever, you can make it a template, you can make it custom text, whatever it is that you want. It doesn't have to be text message, you could do emails. There are endless possibilities with automation that you can do to leverage it. So when you're looking at your processes, think of, okay, what are the things that I'm doing over and over and over again, the same thing, and how can I automate that? What can I do to eliminate all the manual work involved so that way you can free your time up and free your staff's time up to do things that are not necessarily more important, but a better use of their time, a more effective and productive use. So.
Yeah, one thing that, Kristin, I'll just tack on there, what we often see is that there is not adequate follow-up for the unresponsive leads, right? And we talked about unresponsive leads earlier. So think about, there's been a time gap and you have an automation, or let's say you don't even have an automation. You have a calendar reminder that says follow up with so-and-so, right? Or you have a scratch pad on your desk that says follow up with Kristin and Maddy and Marissa or something, right? And, you might get to that checklist or you might not because you're busy. Now, let's say you follow up once and you cross that out. How many more times are you going to write that list? Data shows that you are only going to write it once or twice, that you are only going to do follow-up once or twice at your own behest, right? But if you actually set it up so that you can do repeated follow-up, that if you still don't hear from someone after another 2 days and another 2 days and another 2 days, at least 5 follow-ups is what's required to have high, over 90% confidence interval that you have exhausted the attempts to gain 90% of the available clients that are in that pool, meaning you can have high confidence that after 5 attempts, you've exhausted most of the efforts that are worthwhile, right? But you're only typically doing 1 or 2. So it's really important that you set up those automations, those triggers, so that if conditions are met, then X event happens. And that's exactly what Kristin is showing you here. And all it means is that you are more persistent in your follow-up. And that's what is also going to help you win new business. Just because you talk to someone once and they didn't answer your next phone call does not mean that they're not interested. It doesn't mean that they fall off your checklist. It just means that people are busy, and like anything else, they need constant reminders. There's probably a reason why they didn't hire an attorney until this point, and it's probably some procrastination or lack of prioritization. Not everything is, a car crash that just happened. We know that there are plenty of legal matters that have festered for quite a while. So expect that people are doing the best that they can, but that they do sincerely want to hear back from you, and not to be apologetic about it, but to be persistent. So let's talk about number 6, which is the lack of outsourcing and delegation. And you can sense a theme here. We're talking a lot about technology and talent to help your firms thrive. So certainly there are consequences. What we understand from all the data that comes out for the industry is that many attorneys feel overwhelmed. They feel underprepared for running a business. They feel like law school didn't prepare them for running the business side of a law firm. And they feel often inadequately trained for running and managing and hiring staff. So how can that be assisted? Well, as Kristin mentioned, there are contractors who can be available. Often there are fantastic onboarding teams that I know both of our companies offer, but at some point on a day-to-day basis, you really need to think and sit down about what can I delegate? What can I automate? What can I outsource? And one of the most helpful ways to do that is to use the Eisenhower decision matrix, which is going to help you guide each task or project into one of the 4 quadrants, which is either do, decide, delegate, or delete. Delegate, you could even potentially have defer as a 5th element here. Maybe it's not something that you do immediately. Maybe you don't even want to decide or schedule a time to do it. You're going to defer that decision completely. A lot of D words there. So use this matrix to think about, what are the items that are constantly bogging me down, or I'm rewriting on my to-do list for tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm rewriting it for the next day. Like I'm just never getting to those things, or I'm not doing them to the level that I want to be doing them. Maybe you're not attentive enough to accounting or marketing campaigns. And it doesn't necessarily have to be legal work, although it often is. Think about what are the dynamics of your firm that are bogging you down, or that you are taking home with you at night to work on after dinner, or coming in early, or working at the breakfast table before your kids go to school. Think about what those items are and how you could delegate them if it's appropriate, or how you could potentially do them and accomplish them more efficiently, such as those follow-ups that we just talked about. Kristin, do you have anything you want to add here?
Other than ever since I learned about the Eisenhower matrix, I started using it myself. It's a game changer. If you haven't used this, outside of just figuring out what to do with your processes, this is just a great tool for everyday use.
Yes, it really is. There's another wonderful webinar that we have on our YouTube channel that it talks all about, so Velocity Work put on this webinar with us, talks all about just arranging your calendar with boulders first and then rocks and then pebbles, right? And it's a similar concept. What you decide to do is often going to be some of the most time-consuming tasks. And depending on your personality type, you may choose those itty-bitty snackable tasks that give you that endorphin hit. But actually, what you want to do is focus first on setting out the tasks for yourself so that you do the big boulders and you don't just snack on those small pebbles all day long, because then the big work doesn't get done. So have people who are available to you to work on the things that you know better than to work on yourself, even if they feel rewarding in the moment to cross them off your to-do list. So the 7th item here is not separating leads into the appropriate stages. We've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to touch on it individually here. That yes, we've talked about automations and workflows, but one of the things that you probably noticed in a screenshot a few slides ago that Kristin shared is that there are certain tags and associations that leads have in their status in Neos. And we often think about that when we run operations here at Smith.ai. We run off of Salesforce, for example, and we need to have different statuses and stages for where a lead or prospect is in their conversations with us. And that's the same for any business. So make sure that you have those statuses set up, because a lot of your triggers, automations, workflows will rely on careful data management so that people are in the appropriate bucket, and those automations can run based on their state of being. Kristin, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, just to emphasize that the stages, if you have everything just grouped under kind of one stage, you have the checklist, you've built out automations, they lose a lot of their power when you don't also associate them to stages and statuses, because you want to do different things at different times, and you may not want all of those checklist items to appear on your checklist for every aspect of handling an intake, from the time they have their first contact to the time that it turns into a case, or you refer it out, and you don't want to see all of that all at once. It's helpful when you have it in stages and statuses, that as something progresses through the stages and statuses, then you're seeing specifically the work that's done then. So then, let's say it becomes unqualified early. You don't have to manually close out all of those checklist items, because, hey, they didn't even populate because you're not even to that stage yet. So it's really important to save you time and energy to have that prep work of having all the stages and statuses mapped out. So that way, when you're building your checklist, you're building your automations, all of those are tied back into that, and you're not doing things or you're not even seeing them in your workflow until it's actually time to do them. And it's really good with those stages and statuses when you have those automations tied to it. So things like, when it's reached a stage of, you don't want this case, you're going to refer it out, and you send out that referral letter, all of that can be tied to an automation. Same with, let's say you decide this is a qualified case, I want to take it. You can send out that retainer, all maintaining the stages and statuses and including the automation with it.
I love that. And I feel like the best signal that you're making a mistake in insufficiently, handling these appropriate stages is that you find yourself repeatedly skipping over irrelevant questions, right? Skipping over irrelevant steps. Like if you're doing that, that should be a signal to you that something needs to be modified. You shouldn't keep, jumping over them and putting a Band-Aid over it, or writing NA in certain fields that are irrelevant, right? So things like that should be a clue to you that there is an improvement that is, just waiting in the wings to be there for you to make things more efficient. Not tracking client origination sources. I think we can skip over this pretty quickly because I already talked about this, how important it is. Just one quick thing here. If you, there's a lot going on this slide. If you are using a tool like CallRail or Smith.ai call tracking or things like that, where you have phone numbers specific to phone lines for marketing campaigns, you want to make sure that you have that connected, that you have your tracking links connected. For example, you might give Smith.ai a scheduling link to use that is specific only to Smith.ai, so you can see all the bookings that come through that channel. That can also be helpful. So you didn't just find out, I got, 10 bookings this week from Google organic or Google paid, but of those, I also saw that 5 of those appointments that came through were booked by Smith.ai, and the other 5, maybe they were booked by that intake specialist or by the leads themselves if you have that opportunity to do self-scheduling on your website. So think about the different layers of tracking and sourcing that you want to have visibility into. There is a lead flow here that captures what we've been talking about, right? We understand there's multiple sources that could be generating leads for your business. They could be referrals, reviews, local listings, SEO content, etc. And they can come through any number of channels. These are the primary ones. And then who is responsible for that initial conversation, right? Is it the law firm owner? Is it someone you've designated, maybe not quite sales rep, but someone in that role, intake specialist? Who is the technical lead, right? Is there an attorney or an assistant who is responsible for that? Or is it a receptionist service or AI that is the first responsive layer? Then there's qualification. Then there's their responsiveness to that qualification. Because once a lead is qualified, that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to go. Maybe they say, I need to talk to my spouse or business partner, right? And then you have to nurture and follow up. Even though you feel like you've got a live one on the line, they're not ready to pay or commit. So just because you pass qualification doesn't mean, you've got green lights for the rest of your racetrack, right? So make sure that your follow-up is in place there. And if you have had the consult, if you need deeper intake, that is all happening during that sales process. And then hopefully that retainer agreement, that signature is signed on the line, and you've got a new client. So this is just a visual representation of what we've gone through today and how tracking is important to understand the speed, the velocity, the qualification rate that people move through this funnel. And there's a great tool also in Neos for this. So Kristin, if you don't mind reviewing this, I'd love to go through it.
Yeah, so you were first talking about, you get through all these channels of different, all these marketing channels are bringing you leads. And it's really important to identify what channels you are winning with and where you're wasting your money. Maybe on the areas where you are really profitable, maybe you want to invest more in those. Or maybe on the areas where you're not so profitable, you want to drop them, or you want to fine tune them because maybe there's some tweaks that you can do to that marketing strategy in that channel to make it more effective. And so making sure that you are, tracking what your spend is in each category, and then tracking the effectiveness of that as well. This is just a screenshot of a very basic marketing spend report, but you can build out some pretty expansive reports to be able to identify, how much you're spending, how much you're profiting, Maybe there's a certain channel that's bringing you in the most profitable cases that you have, and maybe there's another one where you're just getting, onesie twosies, small settlement items, and you're not really profitable on those. So making sure that you have reporting in place, that you're not just on those intakes where we talked about filling in the source and the campaign, so you can, track it. The most important part outside of tracking it in the initial part is making sure you're doing something about it, making sure you're reacting on that data and making it a part of your overall marketing strategy that should be constantly adjusting. It's not something you want to set and forget. It's something that you should be watching on a monthly basis and adjusting as you need to.
Yeah, I completely agree. Take away the attribution step and the action step, and those are the two components to fully utilizing what's available to you here, and the data that you gather on the calls and emails, and the data that you review and analyze in the back end. Lack of cost transparency. Depending on your firm structure, there are a number of different ways that lawyers are adding transparency into their initial dialogues with potential clients. And this is an area where obviously you want to be referring to your ethical guidelines and rules within your state. But there are certainly ways that we can help clients understand, does it make sense to move forward in a conversation? Is this something that is going to be sustainable and affordable? Or if not, where are the funds going to come from? Having those conversations early and upfront, potentially in that first consultation, but even prior to that, I know some trademark attorneys who ask, do you have $5,000 reserved for this process? If not, you may be disappointed, in what we're able to do for you. And if you want to go look it up, it's called Indie Law by Joey Vitale. He's got a great questionnaire built into his Calendly scheduling tool that just says, like, very plainly, here's how we work, here's what we can do. Are you financially committed? And if so, do you understand what the minimum commitment is going to be, or the average commitment is going to be? Now, for something like trademark law, perhaps that's easier to estimate than for your particular practice area. Certainly, with personal injury, you cannot do things like that. But if it is something that relates to your practice area, it feels within reach, consider doing that. Consumers are so used to transparent pricing at this point that it is quite shocking to them when they go and work with an attorney and they don't have access to that level of transparency or even a modicum of transparency. So think about that. Think also about the adequate payment options that you are making available to them. Do they have the option to, to borrow or to split payments? What online tools have you built into your firm that allow you to have more flexible options for those who have a willingness to pay, but the structure needs to be slightly modified? So be clear about your costs, and as much as possible, share your fee structures and how they work. Just explain it to them. Don't expect that they're going to, read every word and understand those retainer agreements. Break it down for them. That really helps you be an ally and align with them before they even become a client. It establishes trust, all of those good things. To be clear and upfront early on means that we can set the expectation you're being clear and upfront throughout the process. There's certainly a heavy investment of time and money in any legal matters. The last example here of an intake mistake is just failing to clearly explain your firm's value. I love ending on this one. The really interesting thing that I want to highlight here is that we so often undersell ourselves. You spend all the time on SEO and paid search ads and local listing ads and your Facebook profile and your social media managers and making everything look fantastic, getting on some new platforms as you continue to expand your social media presence, even your email newsletters. But on a phone call, you don't take a moment to explain the value, the market presence, the tenure that your firm has, your tenure as an attorney, why they should trust and depend on your firm, why they should choose your firm. So make sure that you're asking clients for testimonials, adding those into your website. Make sure that you are embedding those into your email communications. find ways to incorporate that as part of the conversation, and don't be afraid to brag, within reason, obviously within the ethical guidelines, that you have accomplished quite a lot as a firm, as an attorney, and that you are proud of it. And hopefully that sets the stage for a lot of future success. We see this as one of the areas of major improvement that firms can make. Don't be so shy. We're going to get into the Smith.ai and Neos integration right now. Kristin, anything you want to add to either of those two topics before we jump in?
Just to highlight that a lot of times, if you, and this is applicable to any industry, if you work and live in an industry, a lot of words, if it's industry jargon, it's very clear to you what that is. But to our clients, it's not so much. So ensuring that on the cost transparency and communicating your value, you're really communicating in a way that your client can understand. So that way they don't feel overwhelmed by jargon or words that don't really mean anything to them. So breaking it down in plain language is really important.
I love that. Such a great point. All right, let's talk quickly about Smith.ai and Neos. So when Smith.ai and Neos integrate, what happens is, let's just take an example phone call. A phone call comes in and it's a new lead or it's an existing caller or client. Now, that record either doesn't exist or it does exist in Neos. If it doesn't, Smith.ai will create one. And if it does, then Smith.ai will update the communication center. And if it's a lead, the notes field on the lead. What you'll get is everything about that call. So who called, when they called, the entire call details. If you have call recording and transcription enabled on your Smith.ai account, a link to that recording will also be made available. And those call summaries will be linked to that contact and lead intake. So what that looks like is here on a call detail page. You can see the full call summary, the email and phone number of Mark in this example, how much time it took, the date and time, and who the contact is that was matched or created. It will show up as Smith.ai as the staff, and you can see that it was inbound. If it's an outbound call, it may show up as outbound. And those are the call details that you can expect to see. You'll also see it's a little cut off, but there's also the signature of the particular Smith.ai receptionist who handled that call. And under Mark, you can see the multiple calls that he has made in. So you can see the full call log here in the Smith.ai dashboard. There's also a call log, but we find that for folks who are using Neos, it's very helpful to see that full call log under notes within that lead. Anything that you wanted to add here, Kristin, to that?
Yeah. So one of the benefits of having an integration with Smith.ai, so although they're handling that initial call that comes in, all of that data is, without you having to do anything, is going into Neos, and all of those automations that we talked about, if you're tying those to checklists, those can kick off too. You can it's coming into Neos as an intake. You have all the data there that they collected. And so you can really just, hit the ground running when you are then, taking over that intake.
Awesome. So yes, this is available to any Smith.ai or Neos client. I believe for Smith.ai, we include one free integration. And Kristin, perhaps you can cover this in your slide about Neos. Is the integration included?
With, as far as if you were to integrate with Smith.ai, that is going to work on any of the plans that we have. So it even works on the Essentials plan. We have, for those of you that are existing customers, I would highly recommend that if you liked any of the features that you saw today and you don't see that you're able to do them, go ahead and reach out to your customer success manager. For those that are new clients, I would say it was about 50-50. Half of the features here are just standard with our standard intake with Neos Essentials, and then where you really get into the advanced functionality like the dynamic forms and automations and things like that, that is going to come at our Platinum package.
Wonderful. So you can see, you can contact sales@assemblysoftware.com to learn more, or contact your rep, as Kristin mentioned. As far as Smith.ai, we do have both voice assistant and virtual receptionist plans. The voice assistant plans, that is AI first and receptionist backup, which means you get 24/7 AI call answering. There's a lot of incredible examples on our website. We don't have time for me to entertain you with how wonderful those demo examples are, but please go listen to those. They're pretty phenomenal. That starts at actually under $100 a month. We have our live agents who are on standby 24/7, 365. So the AI will capture all the information, gather basic screening details, and if a call schedule is needed for a consultation, if additional detail verification is required for new leads, then that gets transferred to one of our live agents to confirm those details or to book that appointment, or for any escalation where someone is asked for a live agent. So very different than any of your AI answering solutions that do not include a human. We just do not trust that AI is 100% there yet, and your leads are too valuable to allow that small amount of risk, but real risk in getting a letter on the email off, or a digit on the phone number. 9 out of 10 is good, but not good enough when it comes to phone number digits, right? So that includes the free Slack integration, free spam blocking, and many things that I discussed today are relevant. The virtual receptionist plans are human first. The AI comes into play with their interaction of our system. So that's our agents interacting with our system. There's AI built into that in the free spam blocking and many other tools that we utilize. So there is a free integration with Neos included with this, and plans start at just 30 calls a month, just under $300. So you're getting a dedicated agent every single time. That is who is answering the phone call. We also do make outbound calls with virtual receptionist plans, and that's not currently available for the voice assistant plans. So this is just a quote, and I would say that even though Jesse said this about Smith.ai, I really like this sentiment in general that matches the webinar theme. So Smith.ai is my secret to business growth and client happiness. I couldn't have thought of a better summary to what we talked about today. There is such immense impact on small changes that you can make that are within reach for your firm, better utilizing Neos, setting up call answering, delegating effectively. All of these things can make a huge impact on your life and also your clients' satisfaction. So if you are interested, Smith.ai is available and ready to you. Voice Assistant is available for sign up immediately. Self-serve virtual receptionist plans do require an onboarding call and working with our team. So setup takes, a few days. You can get $100 off your first month with code NEOS. And I think that is the end of our slide deck. So we finished on time. We went through a ton of content. Kristin, is there anything else that you would like to communicate?
Other than just, it's been a pleasure being able to work with you guys at Smith.ai, and I love the integration, and I see so much potential for some of the firms that we have. So I would definitely recommend it.
Thank you so much. We're huge fans of yours as well. Marissa, nice to see you.
Hello. So we just had one question. See, you guys answered all of them. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. If anybody has any last questions, feel free to email Alessandra at assemblysoftware.com, and she can either forward them on to Maddy, or if it's about Neos, we can answer them ourselves. And again, you'll receive a recording of this webinar. Also, let Alessandra know if you would like to learn more about Smith.ai, and we will include the link to sign up for a demo of Smith.ai, and you can use that code NEOS for $100 off your first month. We will send that in a thank you email. So thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you, Maddy and Kristin. You guys did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
take care,
Bye.
everyone.